you need to make sure that you have a firm understanding of just how much that price could increase. Every builder is different in what they include or consider a standard feature, right? For some people, a standard feature is like, hey, everything that you see in this model house is a standard feature. There's other builders where they almost nickel and dime you, or they try to draw you in with a really attractive list price, and then once you get you in the door, then they explain like they're going to charge you for everything. They're going to charge you for the outlet, they're going to charge you for the lights, they're going to charge you for the ceiling fan, they're going to charge you for everything out there, and before you know it, that base price is now risen by $75,000 more than what you thought it was going to be. And so one of the questions that I typically will ask to kind of get Welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into a reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home. We'll be offering expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. In this week's episode, I want to take some time to talk to you about how new construction really works, and more importantly, what buyers like yourself really need to know. These are the things that you need to keep in mind, things that you need to be wary of, things that you should look out for when you are considering whether or not new construction is the right route for you to go. New is always the appealing option. It's something that a lot of people want to pursue, but they might not know the ins and outs of it in the ways that it could differ from other opportunities that you'll come across. And so wanted to take some time to really break that down and help give you a better idea of how it works, because believe it or not, there's still a ton of confusion regarding new construction in the industry and what buyers are going through in different situations. And so I'm going to break it down into 5 different tips and also give a little bonus as well at the end. But I just wanted to break down these 5 different things that I think that everyone should keep in mind whenever you're considering new construction in different communities. You know, you're always driving around and you see different communities popping up in different places, and you'll see the signs and wonder like, hey, is this something we should go check out? And you might stop over there on a Saturday or something like that, and you're trying to figure out like, okay, is this really a good option, or is this really something that I want to look into? We're going to break that down for you. So one of the biggest things that you really need to understand is just the initial contract process, right? So the paperwork and the contracts that are signed for real estate deals, it can vary greatly depending on what area or which state you're in. So in North Carolina, we have, our realtor association has a bunch of attorney drafted standard forms that we use for our real estate deals. And it's the same across the entire state. And so, right, you could do a deal in Raleigh or in Charlotte or in Wilmington or in Asheville, and you will see a very similar contract process. Now, the terms of those contracts may be different depending on the area you're in, but the actual verbiage and the way those words look is often going to be the exact same no matter what area you're in our state. There are some states where they might have it where it's like different pockets or areas have their own contracts, but the point I'm trying to make is that there's usually a standard contract that most agents in a particular area are using for real estate deals. It's not like we all have our own individual contract, which is important because, again, you want to make sure that you have someone who understands the ins and outs of that deal and how that contract works. So as realtors, we use those standard contracts all the time. We know those forms inside and out, and we can speak to like, hey, here's the things you need to look out for. Here's the things that could change from year to year. We can know that very quickly. The difference with new construction, though, is that every builder will often have their own contract, especially if it's a big like tract builder. If it's a small kind of mom and pop type operation, they might just use the standard new construction forms that the Realtor Association offer. But a lot of builders, especially the ones that have a large amounts of inventory or are national builders, they have their own contracts. And so you need to understand that their contracts are going to be completely different from the standard ones that you will often see with other homes, and they're always going to be written in favor of the builder. So that's one thing that you need to understand up front, right? You might get into a situation or a problem and realize like, hey, like I don't know what if this bad thing happens or what if this goes wrong. More times than not, that contract is often written to favor the builder or protect the builder in any and all situations. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't still sign that contract if you want that house, right? Like all the new construction deals that I've done like that, we've always used the builder's contract. The difference is that they made sure that they had me as their agent go through and look over the forms to make sure that they were fully aware of whatever may be wrong in that particular situation. Right. And so you need someone who can help explain to you like, hey, here's all the pitfalls. Here's all the things that you need to be prepared to know. There's not going to be, or I shouldn't say there isn't, but it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to bring your own contract and say, hey, let's use this to go under contract on the house. Most builders aren't going to go for that. They're like, no, you're using our forms or we'll find another buyer. You decide what you want to do, right? And so a lot of times buyers will have to say like, okay, let's try and figure this out, figure out what's going on there. And this isn't like buying an app in the app store or downloading a new software program where they have these pages of terms and conditions that you just skip over and click agree just because you don't feel like dealing with it. There is a lot of implications and things that are could hurt you later on down the road. And so you need to make sure that you are taking the time to read it and understand it for yourself. Even if you have an agent in your corner, you still need to make sure that you have a firm understanding of what all is at stake, because you're going to be the one that's on the hook if something goes wrong. So understand, again, that there are different contracts from the standard ones. And just kind of backtrack a little bit. I didn't really go through the process of kind of explaining out the new construction versus other homes. Most of the time, if you're looking at a house that someone has currently or previously lived in, that is what we call a resale home or a resale inventory. It's kind of like the real estate version of a used car, right? That's the resale homes that we're looking at, and that's how most transactions are typically going. New construction is just that. It is brand new. No one has ever lived in that house. And so like it changes the way how home is viewed by potential people. Even if it's a home that someone has only lived in for a year or 6 months, once that house goes back on the market, it can no longer be marketed as a brand new home. It now becomes a resale. Just like when you drive a car off the lot, it's no longer a new car. Same thing with the house, right? And so new construction means no one has ever lived there. So much so that when you look at the model houses, right, you might see an on-site agent who has their office set up in a model home. When they go to sell that home, it's often the last home that's sold in an area or the neighborhood. But when they sell that home, they won't sell it as a new construction. They'll sell that home as a resale property in a lot of cases because, again, they've been living in that particular property as well during that time. And so these are just all things you want to keep in mind. That one thing I wanted to kind of stipulate the difference between those two. And so if it's a resale home, again, more times than not, in that general area, they'll have standard contracts that most people are familiar using. New construction, it's more of a wild card where every builder has their own individual contract. I've seen some that are like 20 pages long. I've seen some that are like 60 pages long. It just depends on the builder, but you need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what that contract says and what things are in place to protect that builder and how that is going to impact you down the road. The second thing is that you need to be able to budget for more than the base price. So when I was talking about earlier, when you're driving around and you see these different communities and you'll see the sign up where it says, hey, we've got houses from the low 300s. And then you drive into the community, you go into a house and you ask them, hey, what's this house priced at? And they tell you, oh, well, it's $333. Right. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's reasonable. That sounds about on track with what I was looking at. And then you kind of look a little bit more into it and you start to go like, okay, well, if we were going to contract, kind of what things are looking at or what features and stuff like that we would need to add. And then the more you start digging or the more you start looking into the situation and researching it, you realize very quickly that 333 is just the base. That doesn't include all these other factors and features that can come in and add additional cost to that home. For example, you look at what they call a lot premium, right? Not all lots are created equal. Every single lot of land in a neighborhood is different from the other in some way, shape, or form. There are no two lots that are identical. They're like fingerprints, right? There might be some lots that are a little more rocky, some that have a little bit more of a slope than others. There are some that might back up to a street or a main road. There are some that may back up to a electric line or a utility line or something like that. There's all kinds of different things that could change based on those lots. And so they know, as well as anyone else, that where the house actually sits in that neighborhood can play a huge factor into how people view that home and how much they can sell it for, right? So if you've got a house that has a beautiful view of this lake that they have in the neighborhood, that house is going to be, or that lot premium is going to be significantly higher than the lot that is right there next to a major power line, or like has a really steep driveway that's almost like a vertical incline, where they know that those things are in play, right? And so that lot premium could jack up that base price tens of thousands of dollars. And that's just one feature that's added on. That's not talking about all the other features that may come into play, right? You may say, hey, I want to have LVP in these rooms instead of carpet. That's going to be another feature that adds more to the price. Hey, I want these cabinets instead of the other ones. Okay, that might be another feature that's going to add a little bit more. You need to make sure that you have a firm understanding of just how much that price could increase. Every builder is different in what they include or consider a standard feature, right? For some people, a standard feature is like, hey, everything that you see in this model house is a standard feature. There's other builders where they almost nickel and dime you, or they try to draw you in with a really attractive list price, and then once you get you in the door, then they explain like they're going to charge you for everything. They're going to charge you for the outlet. They're going to charge you for the lights. They're going to charge you for the ceiling fan. They're going to charge you for everything out there, and before you know it, that base price is now risen by $75,000 more than what you thought it was going to be. And so one of the questions that I typically will ask to kind of get a feel for whether or not that could be the case is I will usually ask them, like, on average, how much are buyers typically spending on upgrades or changes that they made to the home, or like any of the improvements. Or if they have a design center, I say, hey, what's the average amount that you typically see people spending in the design center? Because there's a lot of people who go in the design center like, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm not going to be getting these lavish upgrades or changes. I'm not doing any of that stuff. And then they get in there and they realize, oh, well, I mean, we got to do this or we have to do that. And before you know it, they've spent $30,000 in the design center and they barely even blinked, right? You don't want that to be the case. Or if it is going to be the case, you want to know that up front before you even get attached to the home. And so I'll often ask, what is the average amount that buyers are typically spending on top of the base price, just to get a rough ballpark view of what they could be spending on top of that, and whether or not that is something that they can look into. Now, one advantage to the current market that we're in right now, especially in our market, I can't speak to the other markets in the country, but I would imagine they're pretty similar. But houses, because of the rates and affordability issues, inventory has been moving a lot slower. And a lot of the builders are in situations where they're trying to unload or try to sell this inventory before they move on to building the next one. They don't want to end up in a similar situation to the Great Recession, where the market changed abruptly and they were sitting on all these houses that they hadn't sold yet and were struggling to get rid of, right? They don't want to be in that position again. And so what a lot of builders have opted to do recently is, instead of building a sea of different neighborhoods based on like when the people are making changes and stuff, they will build out just a few or a handful of homes completely. They call them spec homes, right? So they'll make all the selections. They won't give the buyer the ability to make those selections. They will decide what selections, what cabinets, what flooring, what paint colors. They'll make all those decisions themselves, build that house completely, and then sell it, right? And so the downside to that is that you, as the buyer, don't have the ability to make your own decisions on what kind of changes or selections you want for that house. The upside to that, though, is that whatever price they're quoting you, more times than not, if they've already built that house up completely, the price is the price, right? It's not like you're going to come in and be like, oh, well, actually, it's going to be about $40,000 more than that. If they've already built that house and made all the selections, there's nothing else to do. That price, everything that would be included or would be an add-on has already been included in whatever that price is. And so that's what you want to look at, but you don't want to get too motivated or incentivized by seeing the signs that say like from the low 300s, because very rarely is that actually the case, right? Or it might be in a situation where like that was the case when the neighborhood first opened, but now it's gotten to the point where there's nothing in that area that is in the low 300s, right? So those are all things you want to look at, but it's not just about the base price. The third thing, be prepared for delays. Now, that's not to say that delays are guaranteed or delays are always going to happen, but you still want to be prepared for them or have a backup plan in place. And I say this even for resale homes, even for properties that have a traditional seller. You always should have a plan B in place just in case, right? If something goes wrong and you end up needing to stay where you are a little bit longer to get that deal to close, you always want to have another backup plan in place. And it's no different with new construction. Now, going back to my previous point when I was talking about spec homes, that's another advantage to a spec home is that hey, this house has everything. They've received the certificate of occupancy. The house is ready to go. It's passed all inspections from the county or the state or whatever it needs to do. It has everything ready to go. And so it's highly unlikely that there would be delays, right? It's not like we were waiting on the windows to come in, but there was a delay, or we're waiting for this piece to come in for the HVAC and there was a delay. It's highly unlikely those things will happen. And so they will usually have a better idea of when they can get you in that house if it's already been built. But if you're talking about a house that's being built from the ground up, right? Like if you're going under contract when it's just the foundation hasn't even been poured yet, that is a situation where you definitely want to be prepared for the possibility that it could go longer than normal, right? You want to look at the normal timeline. Typically what we see usually in our areas, especially if it's a big time builder, about 6 months, 6 or 7 months is kind of like a general timeline from foundation to building up. But that could change based on the product delays. We saw that happen a lot in 2021 and 22 when there were all these delays because of the pandemic, and you saw these product delays. You saw the price of lumber skyrocket. We were seeing builders having to go up on price mid-contract and say, hey, if you can't pay this higher price, we're just going to have to kill this deal because we can't sell that house to you for what we originally agreed to. We saw situations where supplies in different materials were taking so long to come in that builders were having to delay a building or a process or getting a home to close for 6-12 months past the original estimated date, right? So they would tell us like, hey, June, we should have this house ready to go. And it would be April of the next year before that house was finally finished. I had people who were scrambling, living with family members. They were having to do short-term rentals. It was a mess, right? And that had not been, up to that point, that had not been the norm, right? And so that was definitely something that was a little bit unique, but it definitely drove home the point for me and letting buyers know, have another plan in place, right? You have a short-term rental as a backup. If there's family in the area that you can stay with, I know that may sound crazy to some of you, but it might be something that you might just have to bite your lip and just stick with it because you just don't know. And as I said before, those contracts are often written in favor of the builder, right? So there's usually clauses and different things that are built to protect them from being sued or anything else should that deal take longer than normal to close. And so you just need to be prepared and have a flexible move-in plan if you're dealing with new construction, because you just don't know, especially if that house has not been built yet. 4, hire your own agent and inspector. So the most builders will usually have an on-site agent. Now, if it's a smaller, like a more custom builder, they may not have they may kind of just work on a case-by-case basis, and you might meet with them. But a lot of times people will usually go to communities where these builders have tons of homes or hundreds of homes to choose from or select from, and they will meet with the on-site agent. Nothing wrong with that. On-site agents are great, and they can really give you some wonderful insight into that. But I always recommend, even with new construction, that a buyer have their own representation in the deal, right? And so what I will often tell my buyer clients is like, hey, if you're interested in something, let me know. I will be happy to go out and tour the property with you, meet with that on-site agent with you as well, and kind of talk through, look through everything. I'll call them, ask for a copy of their builder's contract, review it for you, and do all of that because you want someone who is representing you and in your corner. I meet a lot of buyers who hit it off with the on-site agent, and they go, oh, we're the best of friends now. We talked for hours. They're amazing. We love them. That's great. I understand that you love them. I understand that y'all may have hit it off, but understand if things go wrong in that transaction or that deal, their loyalty is going to revert to the person who hired them, the builder. Right. And so there's a lot of situations where people will just go under contract and sign all these different things with the home, not fully understanding that they have no one protecting them. They have no one looking out for their best interests. They just assume that the agent that's there in front of them is looking out for them. Now, granted, that's not to say that on-site agents are trying to get over on you or anything, but you just need to understand that, again, when things go wrong, their interest or their loyalty is always going to revert to the builder, not to you. I don't care how well you hit it off. You need to make sure that you have someone in your corner to make sure they can look over things, be there every step of the way, help you look through. If you're making selections or designing specifics for that home, you want an agent on hand to tell you like, hey, just so you know, yes, you could pay to have that fence done through the builder, but it might be cheaper for you to do it through another third-party service. Or they might say, hey, I know you were thinking about adding this screen porch or adding this other room, but just understand it's not going to give you the return on investment or the return on value in the home that you're thinking it will. That's why you need an agent in your corner to help you think through these things as you're looking at the property. Also, inspectors. A lot of times people assume that because the county is inspecting the home and doing all these inspections as the building process is happening, they just assume, oh, well, if it's already being inspected by them, I don't need to hire my own inspector. You do. Trust me. Those county inspectors, they're looking out for certain things that may or may not be wrong with the home, but they're not looking at everything the way that a traditional home inspector would. There's a lot of things that they can miss, and I have horror stories to tell you of situations where someone went through the whole building process, bought in their own inspector, and then they found mold issues, or they found like electrical items, they found framing that was done wrong, they found structural issues that were wrong that completely passed all the other county inspections, but it didn't pass that, and that ended up saving those buyers in those situations. And so it's important for you to not just trust that whatever inspections they've had done are going to protect you or have done a thorough enough job of making sure that home is completely safe for you to live in, right? So you want to hire your own agent and your own inspector. Last but not least, the fifth tip, don't assume that everything is included. All right. It's very easy for you to walk into a house and just assume, or you walk into the model. And models oftentimes are decked out. They put all the best features in the model because they really want to draw you in. And you could assume that because there's a certain appliance or a certain feature in the model home, that it's automatically going to be included in your home. And that is not the case. I speak from personal experience. I had to buy an oven for a buyer one time because they were under the impression that an oven that was going to be included in the deal was not, and I missed that on it. And so now I walk through with the most thorough of eyes, right? I make sure that there is nothing that we are not talking about or not. I don't assume anything, right? We've had situations where I heard a story from a agent friend of mine where they, this was probably one of the worst ones I've heard, but they had a garage door on the house, but they didn't include the garage door opener. And that may not sound crazy to you. It may not sound, but like at that price point that this house was, that was ridiculous that it wasn't. And so, but it was one of those things that we just, again, assumed that it was in there. Don't ever make assumptions that something is going to be included in that deal. You always need to be verifying with the agent and making sure that you have a full understanding of everything that is going to be in that house and in that deal. And I don't want to scare you again from new construction, but I always want to make sure that you all have a full understanding of what's at stake in those different situations. And the bonus tip that I talked about that I wanted to reference as well, I didn't want to make it a full thing as well, but one thing that you always want to be looking at as well is just seeing what all is happening in that particular neighborhood. Is the house that you're interested in, is that in the first phase of building that's going on? Is it in the last phase? Are there incentives being offered? Have you noticed that some of the houses in the area have had price drops recently? Any of those things you need to be paying attention to, because that is going to have a very real impact on your purchase. The other thing too is that when you are buying new construction, you need to do so with the understanding that you will likely have to stay in new construction for the value to rise over time, right? So resale homes, the value of a resale home typically rises faster than new construction. Right. And so if someone is saying like, hey, I work at a job where it's a very real possibility that I might have to move in a few years, new construction may not be the best route for you, because if you end up having to sell earlier than possible, not only is it not enough time likely for that neighborhood to fully become established and build up that equity the way that a resale home would, but also there's a very real possibility that you could end up having to compete with the other new construction homes that are being built, right? That's why I said it's important to figure out what phase of the building process is going on in that neighborhood. Because if you end up having to sell sooner than later, you don't want to have to be in a position where you're now competing with all the new construction that's happening out there as well, right? And so those are just things that you want to keep in mind. That also goes back to tip number 4, where I said you need to hire your own agent. If your agent is watching things, they should also be looking out for that as well, to make sure that they can give you realistic expectations of how things are going to look in that deal, in that transaction. And so those are just some few things that I wanted you to really think over. New construction can be a wonderful opportunity for many people, but as with anything in real estate, there's always going to be pros and cons, and you need to make sure you have a full understanding. I hope that helps you. Hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all next week. Have a good one.